We'll take a look at the progression of events as they traversed across Kalamazoo County on this particular afternoon, remembering that a severe thunderstorm warning had been issued at 2:15 in the afternoon. We find from reports the thunderstorm moved into the western edges of the city of Kalamazoo itself. Just prior to 2:30, there was large hail in this area. There was some lightning damage. There was probably also some limited wind damage. Our progression of events will actually begin in the vicinity of Portage and Cork Streets, which is about 4 miles prior to the inception of the tornado itself. It was probably about 2:34 at that time. The storm was traveling to the northeast at about a mile a minute. It would travel 13 miles before lifting at Augusta, but it would continue northeastward at that same rate of speed out through Battle Creek, Calhoun County into Eaton Rapids. The first damage that we pick up that is quite evident in the city of Kalamazoo or in Kalamazoo County, once again north of the airport around Portage, Cork Street areas, and we call that mile 4 prior to the inception of the tornado. This particular storm traveled doing considerable tree damage, some roof damage, extensive antenna damage across this area. It was in this area, extensive greenhouse damage, but yet evidence of straight line winds. It is arguable yet along this path whether the storm actually had tornado characteristics or not. All indications yet along this path indicate that it was only a severe thunderstorm. It did contain large hail. It did contain extremely strong straight line winds that did some damage, but damage which was quite limited in comparison to the damage that it would incur once it crossed the Kalamazoo River and took on definite characteristics of a tornado. It was just east of Comstock and just north of Morrow Lake that the question ends as to whether this was a tornado or not. From this point on across Comstock Township into Charleston Township and into the city of Augusta, there is absolutely no question but what this was definitely a tornado. It was a true tornado. It was on the ground almost continuously along that path. By the time it took on true tornado characteristics, it had traveled about 4 miles from this point. It was about 2:38. The first report of tornado that we had in the Weather Service was at 2:42 from Galesburg. We received 3 reports almost simultaneously in that area, and a tornado warning was issued as quickly as possible. This points out, however, the fact that the area where a tornado first touches down may never have an adequate warning. It is only the areas farther downstream that may receive a warning, and by that time the tornado may nearly be over with. This is Augusta. From this scene, little would a person know that only yards away a tornado had passed, had caused extensive damage, extensive suffering. Less than a block from this particular location was where some extensive devastation occurred. We're now in the village of Augusta, looking at damage in that area. Cleanup is already beginning. This is Saturday afternoon, probably about 5 p.m. The tornado passed through here about 2:45 to 2:50 in the afternoon. Damage was extensive in Augusta, although some sections in the northern parts of town were untouched. Primary damage came in from the southwest, near the river. Here we see a large section of a building leaning up against another building. A large tree blown over. Incidentally, this tree is leaning to the south. Definitely tornado, as opposed to straight line winds, which would have blown the tree over to the north or northeast. This window was undoubtedly exploded outward, as were numerous others in this area. Notice the shingles gone from the roofs. Structures of buildings in this area were altered in some cases where physical damage is not readily apparent to the eye. Some twisting may have occurred. This tree was forced out of the ground on one side and into the ground on the other side. Sightseers and curious came to Augusta quickly. Also, law enforcement and civil defense arrived quickly. The area was quickly cordoned off to sightseers, potential looters. The area was sealed off so that workmen could get in, could clear the area, could restore power, could restore the necessary services. Damage was very extensive in this area, however. Sides of buildings were sucked off. We see a portion of the roof in the far background blown off. First set of shingles removed from that building. More tree damage in this area. Sections of homes, outbuildings littered the streets and adjacent lots everywhere. Roof section taken out, and incidentally the back wall of that home was taken off. It was the kitchen wall that was taken off. China and books in that area were untouched. Damage was evident everywhere in this area. To think that it took only 30 seconds to go from a nice, livable home to a pile of rubble such as this. It's almost incomprehensible, the speed and the completeness with which a tornado can destroy nearly everything along its path. Here is mixed belongings along with the debris. Notice on the home where debris had struck the home. Debris sucked up in a tornado is frequently carried downstream many miles, particularly the lighter pieces of debris. An income tax check that was lifted from this area was reported to have been found 100 miles to the northeast. This is not uncommon in tornado situations, to find light debris scattered downstream a considerable distance. Here we see sections of this roof have been exploded off. The windows were exploded out. The walls of this building no longer appear to be vertical. The pile of debris in the foreground was undoubtedly a home. Here we see a basement section. In looking at this basement section, we will see why one should choose very carefully ahead of time the area that he might seek refuge. This is the bottom of a house. This house was literally turned on its end. The house was stopped partially by a tree. The house was thrown right up against the tree. The tree penetrated the roof to about the base of the roof. House was blown right off from its foundation. A horse was reported injured in this area. This is on the southwest edge of Augusta. This is the string of debris coming in from the southwest, from a home or buildings indicated in the background, probably a quarter to a half mile away. Some damage also in closer areas. A portion of this building was blown away. A portion of the roof was ripped away. Looking back at the building that was upturned on its edge, this was the attached building that was separated. See the stairwell and the floor of the house. Debris in every direction. Tree damage was extensive. Back towards the basket factory, extensive damage in this area, although that was on the edge of the tornado. We're looking practically down the path of the tornado here, looking off to the southwest. This is only a couple of hours after the tornado has passed. Notice how it's cleared off already. Sun is shining. Little or no indication of the weather phenomenon that was here just a short time ago. Here's an automobile that was literally hammered by debris. Windows were broken out. Side was bashed in. Some of the windows were probably exploded out. There was another automobile in this area that was turned over. The automobile behind was damaged extensively by flying debris. Some garages collapsed on the automobiles that they contained. Notice the debris in every direction, piles of rubble, rubble strewn downstream by the tornadic forces of the wind. Once again, the bottom of the house that was tipped on its end. Notice the trees behind the house that may have held the house from blowing over. This attachment to the house, the window was exploded. Possibly that is the reason that it wasn't carried over with the home. Trees blown over, trees stripped of limbs, limbs wrenched off, torn off, broken off. This storm was first spotted by radar over a half an hour before it approached the Augusta area. It was first spotted just east of Benton Harbor. It was spotted in that area somewhat earlier. A severe thunderstorm was issued. Taking a closer look at a basement, this happens to be the southwest corner of the basement. The furnace came over in that area. The chimney also came over in that area. The supporting beam in the center of the basement came down. One should look very carefully at his basement to determine where a safe place is in the basement. In this particular case, the southwest corner certainly was not the safest area. In this particular case, under some heavy furniture may have been a much better place to seek refuge in the storm. One should avoid areas of safety in a basement where there is a nearby chimney, where there are heavy objects on the floor above. He should seek an area where he would not expect debris to fall. Another automobile damaged extensively by debris. We've seen these automobiles from both directions now. They're damaged on all sides by flying debris, not just on the windward side. This windshield undoubtedly cracked by debris, could have even been cracked by hail that preceded the storm. Indications in all of these areas that there was probably heavy hail that preceded the tornado itself. The hail may have preceded the tornado by as much as 20 to 30 minutes. The severe thunderstorm warning associated with this storm was issued over a half an hour before the tornado was indicated. The storm then developed to tornado characteristics, and a tornado warning was issued as soon as word was received that indeed a tornado had formed. This car was caught under a tree that was blown over. Damage, of course, is extensive. A motorhome in this area was reported lost, blown away with no indication of where it had gone, yet 2 to 5 days after the tornado. This was a large tree, appeared to be structurally sound, reasonably good root structure. Many of the areas where tornado winds blowed over trees, root structure was extensive, root structure was good. Roots were literally pulled out of the ground, literally broken off. Other places, of course, there were shallow-rooted trees, and those trees came over easier and earlier. The house standing on end again. Hail 3/4 of an inch in diameter or more is considered to be characteristic of a severe thunderstorm. Hail of that diameter will cause extensive damage. Winds associated with a severe thunderstorm will cause extensive damage, but certainly not the type of damage that we are looking at here and now. The straight line winds that we saw earlier as the storm tracked through southern and eastern Kalamazoo was characteristic of a severe thunderstorm. Straight line winds that blowed trees down, broke limbs off to the north and east. Damage is extensive. Damage is almost total and devastating in the immediate path of the tornado itself. On the fringe areas of the tornado, of course, damage is not quite as extensive. Sections of this home blown away. All that was left was rubble. This was a car in the garage. Damage was everywhere along the path of the tornado as it traveled from Comstock eastward to Augusta. Where it traveled through fields, there was only debris or an occasional power pole wrenched off or trees bowled over. But when the tornado traveled over homes or over buildings, devastation was almost complete. Rubble was everywhere. It was miraculous. Along the entire 9-mile path of this tornado, not a single life was lost. There were extensive injuries, although injuries may not have been as extensive as a person would think with this kind of damage. Something of the order of 12 persons were hospitalized from along the path of this tornado. Relatively light injury and no loss of life, which is almost incomprehensible. It makes us think that tornado planning, tornado protection pays off. Look at that board rammed through the side of that house. Notice how the paint is peeled where hail or debris has pelted the house. Tornado safety pays off, as indicated by the relatively few injuries and the lack of loss of life in this particular storm. We should look at this in retrospect to sharpen up our senses, to further our education on severe thunderstorms and tornadoes, we should evaluate our home and our business location very carefully to determine where the safe places are and where we would go in the event that a severe thunderstorm or tornado approached. One cannot determine that at the last minute. One should think about that ahead of time. He should do some planning along this line. He should know beforehand what some of his options are, where some of the better places are to seek protection and to seek refuge from a storm. More trees over. Insulation everywhere, debris everywhere. Most all streets that we have been along probably looked much like this street before clearing began, and clearing began quickly. Citizens and government alike reacted extremely quickly to clear the debris, to repair the damage, to restore utility service as quickly as possible. A severe thunderstorm can produce winds of 80 to 100 miles per hour, and in some cases has produced hail as large as 6 inches in diameter. Although hailstones were not that large in this particular instance, they could have done extensive damage. Notice how the debris fell into this building. The roof was collapsed. This was the telephone building. But reconstruction has already begun. Minutes and hours after the tornado, people are beginning to bring things back together, to restore services, to restore buildings, to protect buildings from further damage. Here, windows have already been boarded up. Temperatures were to drop into the 20s the night after the tornado, which would have caused extensive freeze damage to exposed pipes where protection was not taken. Temperatures also dropped into the 20s the following night, and by Monday, rain was falling over in the area. On Tuesday, there was even some snow, which added insult to injury. After the tornado ripped off roofs, opened up buildings, then the moisture from the later rain and snow would do its damage. Also damage from the freezing temperatures. We're looking across the park to the northeast, right in the central square of Augusta now. It was only about a half mile beyond this point that the tornado lifted. The severe thunderstorm continued across Calhoun County. Golf ball-sized hail was reported in northern Battle Creek. Wind gusts in Battle Creek reached 54 miles per hour. There was some limited damage in Battle Creek as the severe thunderstorm continued, but damage was not nearly as extensive nor as devastating as we see here. It was relatively minor, more like we saw at the beginning of the picture, possibly not even that extensive. The severe thunderstorm continued northeastward into Eaton County and touched down again in the area of Olivet. Weather radar can detect every thunderstorm. It can follow every thunderstorm very well, but it can only detect about 10% of the tornadoes. As a consequence, it's very likely that the area where a tornado touches down will not receive a warning, because a warning cannot be issued until there is radar indication or until a report is received that there is a tornado or a funnel cloud. We'll be looking at miles 8 and 9 of the tornado damage. A large section of this building was exploded inward. Then the roof fell in. This was cement block construction. Damage of this sort can be caused by extremely strong straight line winds associated with a severe thunderstorm. However, this was a north-facing wall. It was the wall away from the oncoming winds. The wall was exploded inward to the south. Law enforcement showed up quickly in Augusta. They cordoned off areas to prevent looting, to keep out the curious. Tornado safety pays off.